this is a very exciting night, a very timely night, and it certainly is important to our community because we know that when the community and the school system and the teachers collaborate for the improvement and academic achievement of students, that these work very well, and indeed the research is showing that with this kind of partnership, community, schools, and parents, students' achievement does improve. So we're here with Dr. Ann Henderson tonight to talk about some very practical, high-impact strategies for the community and parents and teachers to all work together to improve student achievement. And of course, our focus is on pre-kindergarten.
Why is this important? Do you know who that is up there? Can you guess? They're my grandchildren. I'm shameless about showing off their pictures. That's Thompson, who's 3, and his little sister, she's 1 now. And my daughter, you know, the cameras and the cell phones, he hopped up on the sofa and decided that he was going to read his favorite book to his sister. It's all about trucks. But she's into it, you can tell. And this goes on all the time. Home really is the first school, and they're going to be going to preschool soon. I'm never going to be able to retire. I've been talking about this since my daughter was born. Now I have grandchildren. And it just keeps me focused, and I know all of you who work with children, they come up in our minds all the time. This is what we're here for. This is what we're doing, and we shouldn't ever lose sight of that. So, way back in 2001, there was a law passed in Washington. Remember, it was called No Child Left Behind. And one of the things that it pledged the nation to do was to bring all children to proficiency in math and reading and other subjects, but especially math and reading. By what year? Do you remember? 2014. So what year is this? How did we get here so fast? Here's how we're doing in the U.S. We're about a third of the way there, except for 4th grade math, where we're a little ahead of that. So if, say, let's give it 40%. Say 40% of our kids are proficient in reading and math. What's the flip side of that? 60% aren't there. Now, we've all seen the global economy grow in these last 15 years. So what chance does a kid have of getting a decent job if they're not proficient in reading and math? I mean, we're competing now. Our children, our graduates, are competing for jobs with people in India, Africa, Asia, all over the world, Latin America. And China is building a new university every 2 months. So we're going to have to do better than this, aren't we? So here's Louisiana. Whether you keep the Common Core standards or not here, the standards have to be really high, really rigorous. And we have to give the kids everything we've got to make sure they master those standards so that they can compete in this global world they all are going to be living in. And one of the things that I'm going to say now, and I'm going to say again and again, is we're never going to get there unless we engage their families. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at how teacher-family collaboration can improve kindergarten readiness and the skills students need to have to succeed in school when they get there. And we're going to be looking at strategies, high-impact strategies that lead to real gains, especially for our children that have been at the bottom end of the achievement gap. But we're not going to stay at 30,000 feet, I promise you. We're going to be looking at very concrete practical ways that are evidence-based and actually working out there in the field to zap that achievement gap we keep talking about and bring all our kids up to proficiency in every subject. So is there a link between family, school, and community partnerships and student achievement? I think you know what my answer would be to that. This is a research review I've done. It's the 4th in a series. And I'll tell you a little story about how it got started. It was back in 1981. Who was president in 1981? Ronald Reagan. And he came in on a conservative ticket. Let's get government off people's backs. Government isn't the solution, it's the problem. And Congress repealed, in 1981, a conservative Congress came in and they repealed all the parent involvement requirements in Title I, which is our largest elementary and secondary program. Wiped them out. Said they undermined the authority of local officials and that it didn't make any difference to involve parents. And I was just amazed. I was away actually on vacation when they did that, and I came back and I'm like, what? Remember Mark Twain? He said, nobody's liberty or property is safe as long as the legislature is in session. Well, I went up to the Capitol Hill and I talked to people on the committees and went in and talked to some of the members of Congress and up to the education department. Now, why did you do this? Why did you think this was a good idea? And they said, there's no evidence that engaging families improves student achievement. And I said, really? So are you parents yourselves? I mean, you're not involved in your kids' learning because you don't think it makes any difference? And they said, that's different. And I realized what they were thinking. They were thinking about those parents. They were thinking those parents who are not well educated, have low literacy skills, little income, scrabble around for part-time jobs. There's not much they can offer their kids. And I just refused to believe that. So I went and I looked at all the research I could find because I had worked in the war on poverty. And I knew that there were a ton of studies. And I found them. And you know what? They were all positive. They all said that when parents are able to be engaged in their children's learning, students tend to do better in school. They earn higher grades and test scores. They enroll in higher level programs. They're more, take things that are more challenging because they're more confident when they have their parents behind them, reinforcing at home what they're doing in school and encouraging them. So then they tend to succeed and go on. They earn credits, they adapt to school, and they attend regularly. This is really important, this adjustment to school, the researchers call it. Kids are much more likely to adjust to school if their families know what's going on at school, encourage and support them, and can go up and straighten things out if things aren't going well for them. They also tend to have better social skills and behavior and graduate and go on to higher learning. I mean, so what's not to like about family engagement? There are actually not that many fields of research where everything points in the same direction. There's a lot of research, it's all positive, and we really have to start paying more attention to it. Why is it that when families are engaged, kids do so much better? We see all these effects. I think James Comer put his finger on it. How many of you have heard of Dr. James Comer? He's a psychiatrist at Yale who started the school development program. He's African American. He went to school growing up with 2 other boys, one of whom ended up dead by the time he was 21 and the other in life in prison. And James Comer and all his brothers and sisters earned higher degrees. They've got, I think they've got an average of 3 degrees each. And it was because their parents made sure they went up to school and fought for them, encouraged them and supported them in every possible way. So the school development program is one of the few whole school reform programs that has a really robust family engagement component. And one of the things he says is, children learn from people they bond to. That's simple, but it's deep, isn't it? Children learn from people they bond to. So don't you think that children are much more likely to bond to teachers who know and respect their families? Teachers who care about them enough to reach out to their parents or whoever is acting as a parent in their life and bring them in? Because, you know, if parents are out of the loop, there isn't a loop. There is no loop. Now, I know enough about electricity to know if you've got a circuit and the circuit is broken, what happens? The power goes out. There's no power. And I think that's what's behind these findings. So if you want to just sum it up, one of the messages I'd love for every one of you to carry out of here is that when families are engaged, not just at home, but at school as well, not only do their kids do better in school, but there's a collective impact. The schools get better. There's a lot of research that shows if you compare, say, a bunch of schools, or this goes for preschool programs as well as elementary and secondary programs, those schools that work well with families are higher performing than schools serving exactly the same population that are not working with families. And so if we ask, well, okay, then why aren't parents more involved? I mean, what's the matter with them? Why aren't they stepping up and coming to our meetings and helping their kids with homework and all of that? And the answer to that question, I think, is put very well by Joyce Epstein, my very valued colleague at Johns Hopkins, who has found in all of her work over 40 years in this field that the best predictor of whether parents step up and become involved is not their income or their education level or their background, but is what the school or the program staff do to welcome, encourage, and support that involvement. That's the key predictor. It's like, if you don't feel invited to a party, it's pretty hard to crash, isn't it? I mean, you're not going to go. And so we need to really, if families are not coming to our program activities, if they're not coming to the reading nights or the learning events that we're having, instead of pointing out the window at them, we need to look in the mirror. What is it that we're not doing that's keeping them away? And then, of course, we can always ask them because they will tell us. What do parents want? So I do this a lot when I work with school districts around the country. I always say, I have to talk to your families. Let me do some focus groups. Let's have a meeting. Let's bring them in. Let's find out what's on their mind, and let's make it fun. Let's have childcare so that they can come. Let's serve them food so they don't have to go home and make dinner and somehow manage to come. Let's send out buses or vans if they don't have transportation. And that seems to be a pretty winning formula. So what they say is, overall, just what do I need to know? What can I be doing to help my kid be ready for school and do well in school? Please, I don't know exactly what my role should be or what I should be doing. And then they say, make us feel welcome. We don't like to come into the building and have somebody say, who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? That that's very deflating to have that happen. Has that ever happened to any of you? You go into a building and you get that cold treatment, that sort of look like, are you a terrorist? Kind of a look. Make us feel welcome and give us information. We'll come, you know, if you've got workshops on how to help our kids, we'll come. And, you know, if we don't have a lot of books or magazines or things at home, could you lend them to us? We'll, you know, we'll use them, we'll give them back. And come visit us, come learn who we are. Don't sit up there in your, you know, your program facility and imagine what it is you think we're like. Come out and meet us and see who we really are. And offer us things at different times, because many families are working different shifts. They might be working 2 or 3 jobs. They have a lot of different responsibilities. They're often caring for other family members who may not be doing well. So we have to do a lot more from our side to make sure that they feel welcome, that they feel that what we're offering is valuable and it's going to be done respectfully. Many families stay away because they think, well, they're just going to blame us if our kids aren't doing well. They're going to say it's our fault. And that's a pretty hard thing to think. I'll never forget a housing project in Kansas City where I did a focus group like this. And it was mostly African American families and in the community room. And the room was full of all these family members and kids who were hopping from lap to lap. And the parents said, we go up to these schools and these rec centers and these places where they have programs for our kids, and they treat us like dirt. They think that because we live here, we don't care about our kids. So they pick up on those signals. And they stay away if they think that they're going to be looked down on. And maybe we wouldn't look down on them, but they don't know that. So we have to do that outreach. I'll never forget the parent I met at it was a kindergarten transition program for families living in a neighborhood, and I was talking to one of the moms there. She had an older son who was in first grade and then a preschooler, and she said it was the first time she'd ever been in the school. And I said, well, did you ever, you know, were you ever invited to come before? She said, well, I'd get the flyers, but I didn't think they meant me. I didn't think they wanted me to come. And I said, well, what made the difference this time? And she said, Tyrone's teacher called me. And she said she wanted me to come. And so she came. So let's look at what are some of the high impact strategies, because there are a lot of things we do to engage families. We have, you know, activities and different kinds of learning nights, and we, you know, ice cream socials and things, but they don't all have the same impact on student achievement. In fact, there's a new study that just came out that says that involving parents has no impact on achievement. But what this researcher was looking at were big federal survey data that asked parents, you know, do you go to events and activities at school? Do you help your kids with homework? Do you go to parent-teacher conferences? Do you, you know, go to meetings and you know, social events and so on? And there didn't seem to be any real correlation between whether parents did that and how their kids did. And that's because those sort of traditional, what we always think of when we think of family engagement, don't really have much bang for the buck. But there's a ton of research that shows the different kinds of interventions that do have an impact. And that's what we're going to look at right now. So we're going to just look at the overall findings from a review of the research done by Joyce Epstein and her colleagues at Johns Hopkins and published by MDRC late last year. So the study, or the research review, looked at how do families affect children's learning at home and at school, and how can school-family partnerships for children aged 3 to 8 lead to positive outcomes for students. And one of the key findings was that all families want and will use clear, feasible ideas for doing fun things with their kids around reading and math. This is what they want, and if they get it, they'll use it. The second part of the findings showed that when programs to do that are sustained over time, in other words, just having one workshop or one reading night or one math fun event isn't going to have the impact that a sustained program will, especially if it targets specific learning goals. So I'll see things that are like, bring your kids and we'll all sit down and we'll read a book, we'll all read the same book and we'll have fun with the kids, and then they'll go home and they'll be able to take the book home. But parents don't get specific strategies for reading with their kids that build vocabulary, that help kids understand what's happening and think about what's going to happen next. And so they don't have much of an impact. They have to be sustained and targeted and well designed. Then another study that's just coming out now, it hasn't been released yet, but I got the early findings, was done by ACT Associates just this year. And it's a meta-analysis. What that means is they took a whole bunch of studies and they lumped all the data from the different studies together to see what the patterns across all the studies showed us. And they were asking, if you have early childhood programs, does adding parent education and a parent, family involvement component yield greater benefits for children and families? And what they found is that the programs that just gave general parenting information classes and kind of handed things out about the activities they were going to do and invited parents to volunteer but didn't really train them in how to volunteer well, those programs had smaller effects on student learning. And those effects tended to wash out over time. But greater effects came from parenting education programs that do what they call modeling. And so that is a teacher or a staff person will do some learning activities with the children that the parents can watch and then practice. But again, over time, not just once. So you're looking at sort of combining strategies here, modeling, coaching, opportunity to practice. Those were the programs that had greater and longer lasting impact. So some of the high impact strategies that were revealed in these two studies, it's pretty obvious, it's just that we don't necessarily do them. So offering activities that are fun, that are easy to use, giving families materials that are targeted to specific skills, counting, math estimation, manipulating objects and learning about patterns and shapes, giving children reading in a way that builds their vocabulary and their comprehension, modeling how to use these materials in workshops followed with time to practice. And then here's another key factor, which is offering families networking opportunities to build their connections with each other, to build what researchers call their social capital, and also to build connections to teachers, because those relationships are extremely important. Those back and forth collaborative communications that should be going on all the time between teachers and parents start to happen in informal, fun settings where they're learning how to do things with their kids, and then continue as collaboration throughout the years in preschool and school. Then lending them materials, especially like the cool stuff like the leap pads and the playstations and other technology that the families might not have that they can take home and use with their kids. And lots of communication in all different forms, you know, videotaping a lesson and sending that home so parents can watch it, email, text messaging. Many families who don't have desktop computers at home probably have smartphones or some kind of a phone that can take a text message. So that's another good way to stay in touch. We just should never forget the most important thing is that face-to-face personal connection that then can be followed up with, you know, using technology. And then from that second study, the high-impact strategies that emerged from that were, again, parent trainers modeling responsive, stimulating interactions with children so parents can really see how it's done and watch the children respond. When parents see that, they say over and over again, I get it, I can do that, I can do that. I never knew that was a way I could read with my kid or I could play a game with my kid. And then the parents practice it and build their confidence and skills. Or another strategy that was identified in that meta-analysis was that parent educators, who often are people from the community, parents themselves, who've been trained to work with parents, and they make easy connections with parents because they come from the same background, they speak the same language, they live in the same neighborhood. So they come with a parent and observe the child in class and explain to the parents, now watch the teacher do this. This is what's happening, and then look at how the kids are reacting. Is this something you could do at home? What about if you had that same little game that the teachers were using, or those, you know, see how she's using the Cheerios to explain math. Parents, that really helps parents see, now they have so much better an idea what their kids are doing in preschool, and then how to reinforce that at home. And then another way is, of course, to show parents different learning activities in class during a home visit or some kind of a parent-child class over a period of time. So this is what's coming out of the research as being really effective practice with young children and their learning.